Some people will tell you this story like it's about a monster who walked into a wedding with a girl no one expected. But if you listen a little closer, you'll hear what I heard. It's really about a lonely king who made one impossible promise, and the human who made him keep it. In the Great Hall of Thorns, under a ceiling of crystal chandeliers and blood-red banners, the vampire king stood perfectly still while his court buzzed around him like nervous shadows. The wedding flowers, dark roses and white lilies, perfumed the air, but to him they smelled faint, almost distant, as if the world itself had moved a step away. His name was Adrian, king of the nocturnal crown, feared by every village whispering beyond the forest. Yet his hands, hidden beneath black leather gloves, trembled so slightly that only someone standing very close would have noticed. He watched servants polish silver goblets, polish floors, polish everything but the truth. Tonight his younger brother, Lucian, would be bound in eternal vows to a noble vampire bride. The union would tie ancient houses together and keep the peace sealed for another century. The music would soar, the torches would burn, and the immortal court would celebrate. And Adrian, the king who had signed treaties and ended wars, had been given one simple royal instruction that unsettled him more than any battlefield ever had. "You must bring a date, your majesty. The court grows suspicious of a king who always stands alone." The words had been spoken by his council with careful smiles, but he had heard the fear beneath them. A king without a queen was a king they did not fully trust. They did not see the way his jaw tightened when they spoke of love. They did not hear the echo in his memory, the soft voice of a human girl from a long-forgotten night, whispering, "Promise me you won't choose someone just to look less alone." He closed his eyes now, and for a moment the hall vanished. He was somewhere else, standing in a candle-lit forest clearing years ago, with the rain warm on his face and a girl's small hand gripping his. He remembered the way she had looked up at him, unafraid, rain dripping from her lashes. She had been human, delicate, so breakable. Yet when she had seen his fangs, seen the truth of what he was, she had only said, "You look tired, you don't scare me." That night he had protected her from his own kind and then erased her memories, sending her back to the human world. Or at least, he had tried to erase them. He had never forgotten her. A rustle of velvet brought him back to the hall. "Your Majesty," murmured Marcel, his oldest advisor, bowing with practiced grace. "The guests will arrive within the hour. Is your companion prepared?" Adrian's red eyes cooled. "I have not yet chosen anyone," he said. His voice was deep and steady, but inside there was a quiet storm. Choosing a date for display felt like decorating himself with a lie. He had watched centuries of courts pretend at love while their hearts were empty. He had sworn long ago he would not do the same. Marcel's gaze flicked to the tall windows where the last low smear of twilight bled behind the mountains. "You must appear with someone on your arm when the first bell tolls. The nobles are already whispering, 'My king.' Some say your heart is made of ice. Others," he hesitated, "others fear you have none at all." The words stung him more than he let show, not because they accused him of being heartless, but because in the quiet of his endless years he sometimes wondered the same. Adrian had seen empires rise and fall, mortals grow old and die, friendships crumble under the weight of eternity. He had learned to rule with discipline and restraint, to offer mercy when he could and justice when he must. But love was a language he understood only in fragments, through echoes of rain and a forgotten girl's laugh. "I will not bring someone I do not respect," Adrian said softly. "I will not pretend." Marcel's lined face softened. He had served Adrian since the king was young, before the crown, before the legends. "Then choose someone you do respect," he said. "Even if she is unexpected. The court needs to see you are still capable of choosing with your heart, not only with your crown." When Marcel left, the hall seemed too large. Shadows leaned in like silent critics. Adrian walked slowly along the aisle that would soon carry his brother and his bride, his boots silent on the polished stone. He ran his gloved fingertips along the edge of a marble column, feeling every cold groove, every carved rose and thorn. Somewhere in the human city below, laughter was rising from warm windows and crowded streets. There were people there who did not know his name, who did not bow in fear when he appeared. People who could look at a stranger and see a person, not a legend. He found himself stopping before a great mirror framed in gold and thorns. His reflection stared back, tall, austere, with crimson eyes that glowed faintly even in the light. His dark hair fell around his shoulders in measured waves, his black coat embroidered with silver threads like captured moonlight. Every detail said power, distance, control. Nothing in that image hinted at the secret he hid as fiercely as any treasure, that beneath the cold surface lived a heart still capable of aching for something pure. He thought again of that rain-soaked night. The human girl had been shivering, lost in the forest, chased by wolves, twisted by dark magic. He had appeared like a nightmare, yet she had clung to him like a miracle. When the danger had passed, she had cupped his face in both of her small hands, searching his eyes. "You look lonely," she had whispered. "Promise me something, stranger." He had almost laughed at the courage in her. "What?" "Promise me you won't pretend to love someone just because people expect you to. Even kings deserve something real." He had promised, and then, with a gentle touch to her temple, he had erased her memory to keep her safe from his world. He had walked away without asking her name, believing that was the kindest thing he could do. Now, standing in the echoing hall with the chandeliers burning brighter, Adrian realized how that promise had followed him across years like a quiet ghost. The court could not know that their feared king carried a human girl's words like a secret law in his bones. "The first bell, your majesty," a servant called from the doorway, voice trembling slightly. A slow, solemn toll rolled through the castle, rattling the glass in the windows and trembling in the stone. Guests would begin arriving. His brother would dress in ceremonial crimson. The world expected a show of power, elegance, and a king who did not walk alone. Adrian drew a long breath he did not need and let it out. His decision formed like frost on glass, clear, inevitable. If he must bring a date, he would not choose from the pale, practiced smiles of his court. He would not decorate himself with a lie. He turned away from the mirror and walked toward the open balcony, where the night wind waited like an invitation. The city below shimmered with lanterns, the streets busy with lives that did not know his name. Somewhere in that maze of light and voices, a memory tugged at him, stubborn and bright. "I will choose someone real," he murmured into the dark. For the first time in years, his voice carried not as a command, but as a quiet hope. "Even if no one expects her, even if they all think I've lost my mind." In the distance, thunder rumbled over the mountains, though the sky above the castle was clear. Adrian stepped onto the balcony ledge, cloak stirring around him like living shadow. One more breath, one more silent promise to a girl who would not even remember his face, and then he dropped into the night, vanishing from the wedding preparations below. As he fell toward the glowing human city, guided only by a memory and an ache he could no longer ignore, an unexpected fear whispered through him for the first time in centuries. Not of battle, not of death, but of what he would find when he reached the world of warm lights and fragile hearts. Because somewhere down there, among people who believed monsters were only stories, he was almost certain he would see her again. And he had no idea what would happen if the girl who once taught him not to pretend discovered that the vampire king had come back for her. Some say the night protects monsters and hides the truth. But if you were there that evening, watching the vampire king fall through the dark toward the human city, you would have seen something different. You would have seen not a monster, but a man who finally admitted he was lonely and who was terrified of what he might feel if someone reached back. Adrian landed silently on the edge of the old clock tower that watched over the human streets. The stone beneath his boots was rough, cracked by years of wind and rain, but the city below pulsed with life. Warm windows, flickering neon, the distant murmur of music. Human hearts beat like 1,000 tiny drums, their rhythms overlapping in a wild, living song. He closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him, searching not with his eyes, but with a sense far older. Fear, laughter, worry, hope. Every heartbeat carried a flavor. Some were sharp with anxiety, some soft with contentment. Adrian listened, stretching his awareness over winding alleys and crowded squares. He did not know her name. He had erased it from her own mind, and over time it had blurred in his. But the feeling she left in him, that he remembered clearly. Her courage, her kindness, the way her presence had silenced the storm inside him for one brief night. He scanned for that feeling now, as if the echo of her soul might still have its own subtle weight in the world. Below, a tram rattled by, its lights streaking gold. A group of students rushed past a corner café, laughing too loudly. In a small apartment above a bookstore, a woman sang off-key to herself while cooking. Each tiny scene brushed against his senses, vivid and human. For a moment he almost forgot the urgency of the wedding, the ticking clock of the immortals waiting for their king. Almost. He slipped from the clock tower into the maze of streets, moving where the shadows were deepest. The city smelled of rain on pavement, exhaust, cheap perfume, and something sweet, fresh bread from an all-night bakery. He walked with a quiet purpose, coat gathered around him, his expression calm. To any passerby, he was just another tall man in dark clothes, a little too pale, a little too composed. As he moved among them, he watched. A young couple argued outside a small bar. The boy's voice rose, anxious and sharp, until the girl's eyes filled with tears. Adrian felt the urge to intervene, to still the storm between them with a single look. But he did nothing. Their hearts would learn or break on their own. That was the cruel privilege of mortals. Further on, an older shopkeeper helped a child tie her loose shoelaces, smiling patiently as she giggled and tried to help. The simple tenderness in that moment caught Adrian off guard, softening something in his chest he tried so hard to guard. He had seen empires crumble, magic burn out, castles turn to ruins. Yet this, a stranger kneeling on cold pavement to help a child, still had the power to move him. "You look lonely." The remembered words brushed his mind again, quiet but insistent. He was turning the corner of a narrow street lined with late-night cafes when he felt it, a flicker like a note he had been waiting to hear in a long, tangled song. A heartbeat that did not fear the dark. Not exactly. There was fear, yes, but mixed with something stubborn and bright. Curiosity, defiance. The memory of standing in a forest and refusing to be afraid. Adrian stopped. The sound came from a small cafe at the edge of the square, its sign glowing softly. Luna Nocturna. Through the wide front window, he saw shelves of worn books, a scratched piano in the corner, and a handful of customers hunched over mugs and laptops. The air shimmered with warm light and the faint trace of live music, someone gently pressing uncertain keys on the old piano. And there, behind the counter, wiping a row of mismatched cups with quiet focus, was a young woman in a simple dark dress. Her hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, catching the light like a memory. Her eyes, clear, searching, moved over the room with calm attention. She smiled at a customer, and it was such a real, unguarded thing that Adrian felt something inside him go still. He did not need ancient senses to know. His body knew before his mind accepted it. The air around her felt strangely familiar, like stepping into a room you used to live in, where the furniture has moved but the light falls the same way. It was her. She was older now, of course. No longer the frightened girl in the forest, but a woman shaped by years he had not seen. There were faint shadows under her eyes that spoke of long nights and too much responsibility. Yet the quiet bravery in her posture, the way she stood in her little cafe as if it were a castle she had chosen to protect, it was the same. For a long moment, Adrian just watched through the glass, stunned by a realization more disarming than any blade. She had survived, she had grown, and she had done it without him. A group of late customers left, the bell above the door chiming softly. The room emptied until only she remained, turning chairs upside down onto tables, humming under her breath. The melody tugged at him. It was almost, impossibly, like the tune she had hummed years ago in the rain to calm herself. He felt his hands curl slowly into fists inside his gloves. He had come to choose her as his date, on a night when his world watched him like a hawk, hungry for weakness. But looking at her now, secure in this little pocket of warmth and light, he felt something he didn't expect, a sharp, protective hesitation. If he stepped inside, her life would never be the same again. You did this once, he reminded himself. You found her, you helped her, and then you erased yourself from her mind to keep her safe. Are you about to undo your own kindness, just because you don't want to walk into a hall alone? The thought burned. It felt selfish. Wrong. He had come here telling himself he would choose someone real, someone he respected. But did he respect her enough to walk away if that was what truly kept her safe? Inside, she moved to lock the door. Her hand reached for the bolt, then paused. Her shoulders tensed slightly, just as they had in the forest when she had sensed something watching her in the dark. Slowly, she turned, looking toward the window. For a terrifying heartbeat, Adrian thought she could see right through the shadow that concealed him. Her gaze brushed the glass, searching, uncertain. She took a step closer, frowning faintly, as if trying to remember something she had lost long ago but could not name. Outside, hidden in the narrow frame between two street lamps, Adrian felt the conflict ripping through him. The wedding, his brother, the court waiting, the bells counting down each moment of his absence. If he returned alone, the whispers would grow, doubt would spread. Alliances might tremble. His people needed their king to stand strong. But this woman, this human, this stranger who once called him lonely as if he were just a man in the range she needed. What? Safety. Freedom from a world of fangs and ancient debts. Or did she need the truth of what had once happened to her? Her fingertips rested on the glass now, as if testing whether it was really there. A small crease formed between her brows. "Why do I feel like I'm forgetting something?" she murmured to herself, the words too soft for human ears outside. Adrian heard every one. His chest tightened painfully. The memory spell he had cast so long ago was not perfect then. It had left its own kind of scar, an empty space where a night in the forest should have been. A missing piece that still tugged at her even now. Maybe, he thought, kindness was not simply erasing the past. Maybe kindness was facing it together. The second bell from the distant castle towered over the night, deep and insistent, reminding him how little time he had left. He imagined the court counting the chimes, exchanging glances. Where is the king? Why is he not here? Where is his date? Inside the café, the woman's hand slid down the glass. She stepped back, shook her head as if pushing away a fog, and turned off the lights one by one. The room slipped into a warm half-dark, only the streetlight painting her in gold. Adrian realized he was no longer choosing between duty and loneliness. He was choosing between two different kinds of courage. The courage to follow the expectations of an immortal court, or the courage to walk into that little café, speak to her as if they were strangers meeting for the first time, and risk changing both their lives forever. He took one quiet step out of the shadows. The wind shifted, carrying his faint, cold scent through the crack of the door just as she reached to lock it. She stiffened again, eyes narrowing toward the entrance, heartbeat quickening not in panic, but in wary alertness. For a king who had walked through fire and war, it was absurd how much strength it took to lift his hand and touch the handle of that ordinary café door. But he did. The bell above it jingled softly as he pushed it open. She turned. Their eyes met for the first time in years, her with no memory of who he truly was, him carrying every moment they had shared buried in the deepest part of his immortal heart. "Sorry, we're already close," she began, then stopped, the rest of the word dying on her lips as she really saw him. Confusion flickered in her gaze, followed by something else, something far more dangerous. Recognition without memory. Like a soul remembering another soul, even when the mind could not. The door clicked shut softly behind him, sealing them into the quiet café as the distant wedding bells tolled again, counting down to a choice that would change everything. Some stories say destiny arrives with thunder and lightning. But in that quiet café, destiny sounded like a small bell over the door and felt like two strangers holding each other's gaze a little too long, each with a question they were afraid to ask. The woman's hand tightened around the key she still held. For a second, Adrian saw her fight with herself, human caution and something deeper wrestling in her eyes. She seemed to search his face, as if she were flipping through the pages of a book she didn't remember reading but somehow knew she loved. "We're closed," she said at last, her voice gentle rather than annoyed. "At least we're supposed to be." Her eyes swept over his dark coat, his old-fashioned boots, the faint elegance in the way he carried himself. "You look like you didn't hear that part." Adrian almost smiled. There was no fear in her tone, only curiosity. He stepped forward slowly, staying a respectful distance away, letting the soft yellow light fall across his face. "I heard," he replied, his voice low, warm, careful. "But I was hoping you might make an exception, just this once." Her lips curved, not quite into a smile. "That's what they all say." She glanced at the empty room, at the chairs on tables, then back at him. "I really should say no, it's late, I'm tired." Her eyes lingered on his for a second more than was natural, and Adrian felt something inside him catch. But I don't know. It feels rude to send you back into the night with nothing. It was such a simple kindness, offered without drama, that his throat tightened unexpectedly. Of all the grand gestures he had seen in his lifetime, it was these small ones that always undid him. Then perhaps, he said softly, you can send me into the night with a cup of whatever you drink when you're too tired to keep going. She studied him, as if deciding whether he was dangerous or just strange. For a vampire king capable of destroying armies, it was strangely humbling to stand there and wait for the approval of one human woman in a worn black dress. Finally, she nodded. All right, one drink and no complaints about the mess. I already closed the register, so this one's on the house. She stepped toward the counter, motioning for him to follow. Take a seat, She stopped, realizing she didn't know his name. Adrian hesitated a fraction of a second. His true name carried power in certain circles, but to her it would be just a word. Still, something inside him wanted, for one night, to be someone other than the king everyone feared. Adrian, he said quietly, my name is Adrian. She repeated it under her breath as if tasting it, then nodded like it felt right. Okay, Adrian, I'm Alina. The name slid into his mind like a key clicking into a long-locked door. It felt exactly like it should have always sounded. What's your poison? And don't say blood, because that would be weird and I'd have to kick you out. The irony almost made him laugh. Coffee will be fine, he said, eyes softening. Whatever you recommend. She moved behind the counter, turning on a single small lamp that threw everything into a warm, cinematic glow. The hiss of the machine, the clink of porcelain, the soft slide of her footsteps over the floor, every sound imprinted itself in his memory, and he hated how much he already cherished them. So, she said as she worked, not looking at him yet, you always go around asking closed cafes to reopen for you, Adrian, or is tonight special? Tonight is complicated, he answered, choosing his words with care. There's an important event I'm supposed to attend, a wedding. Her hand stilled for a breath. A wedding, she repeated. You sound thrilled. Do I? He asked. You sound like someone being dragged to a school reunion where everyone else's life turned out better, she replied, starting the machine again. You don't want to go. I must go, he said. I don't have the luxury of not going. He paused, watching the steam rise. But I wish the reasons were simpler. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye. And you came here instead because I was looking for you. Because I promised you something years ago, and I've spent centuries pretending I don't still hear your voice in the rain. He couldn't say any of that. Because, he said softly, facing a room full of people who think they know you is harder than walking into a café where no one does. Alina looked at him fully then, really looked, and something in her expression changed. The light teasing in her gaze faded into something gentler, more serious. Yeah, she murmured, almost to herself. I get that. She set a mug in front of him, the aroma rich and warm. He wrapped his gloved hands around it and felt nothing, but he watched the way the heat curled into the air between them, like a small, living bridge. So whose wedding is it? She asked, leaning her elbows on the counter. Someone you care about. My brother S., Adrian answered. A faint smile touched his lips. He is kinder than I am, softer. He still believes in happy endings, even in our world. Your world, she repeated, intrigued. Sounds dramatic. Are you from some royal family or something? He held her gaze, letting the truth rest just behind his eyes. Something like that. She laughed once, quiet but sincere. Figures. You walk around like someone who always knows where the exits are and who's watching. That's not normal city boy behavior. You see much more than most, he said. Always been that way. Her fingers began tracing idle circles on the countertop. I don't know, maybe I just notice things. Her voice dropped slightly. Sometimes I feel like I'm supposed to notice things I can't quite see, like there's this missing piece around me, something that almost happened, or did happen, I don't know. Adrian froze. His heart cold, careful, immortal, gave one startled, painful thud against his ribs. Alina's eyes went distant for a moment, as if looking at something beyond the walls. Ever since I was a teenager, I've had this feeling, she continued. Like there was one night that changed everything, but when I try to remember, it just slips away. Everyone says it's just stress or a dream my brain decided to keep. She shrugged, but her shoulders were tight. Sometimes I believe them, sometimes I don't. Rain, a dark forest, her hand in his. You look lonely. The air between them sharpened. Adrian forced his voice to stay calm. And what do you believe tonight? She looked at him, really looked, as if whatever invisible thread tugging at her all these years had suddenly tightened. Tonight, she said quietly, I believe it wasn't just a dream, because when you walked in, I felt that same itch, like my memory was trying to wake up. He swallowed, the taste of guilt bitter and old. That sounds unsettling. It is, she admitted, but it's also weirdly comforting, like when a song gets stuck in your head and you finally remember the next line. Her gaze searched his face. Do you ever get that? Like you're standing in a moment you've already lived, but differently. I live a great many moments more than once, he murmured, and for a second the weight of his years showed in his eyes. Some I would do anything to change, some I am afraid to touch again at all. Silence fell, but it wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken questions. Outside, somewhere far beyond the human city, the third bell tolled for the waiting castle. Adrian felt its reverberation in his bones, a reminder that time, once so endless, was suddenly pressing in on him from all sides. Alina's fingers tightened on the cloth she'd been holding. You should probably go to that wedding soon, she said softly. Whoever's getting married, they'll notice if you're not there. They will, he agreed. They will also notice if I walk in alone. She blinked, alone. The invitation, he said quietly, staring into his coffee, came with a condition. I am expected to bring a companion, someone to stand at my side, for appearances, to prove I am still. He searched for the word and found none he liked. Connected. Her eyes flickered with sympathy. Wow, that's intense and unfair. It is politics, he said, not fairness. And you don't have anyone you actually want to take, she asked. I am sitting in front of her, he thought. She is talking to me as if I am just a lost man in need of coffee, and I would burn down an empire before I let anyone hurt her. He took a breath, feeling a line inside him that he had been tiptoeing around since he stepped into the café. This was the moment. If he crossed it, nothing would be simple again. No, he said first, automatically. Then he stopped and chose a different kind of courage. I mean, I didn't until tonight. Confusion, then curiosity, then a slow understanding moved over her face. She stared at him for a long moment, and in that moment he saw the quiet strength that had once made a terrified girl in a forest step between a vampire and a monster without thinking about herself. You barely know me, she said, but her voice was different now, softer, unsteady. Perhaps, Adrian replied, I know you better than you think. She let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but there was no mockery in it, only a trembling honesty. If this is some elaborate way to ask me to fake date you at a wedding, it's easily the strangest thing anyone's ever asked me. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with some emotion she hadn't named yet. But the ridiculous thing is, I don't feel like it's fake. Neither do I, he admitted. Alina backed away a step, almost as if she needed distance to think. She paced slowly behind the counter, fingers tapping lightly on the edge of a chair. Okay, logical brain time, she said, mostly to herself. You're a stranger, you show up right before closing, you talk like you walked out of a history book. You're apparently from some royal family with dramatic weddings. Every red flag in every safety video I've ever watched is waving at me. She turned back to him, eyes bright and conflicted. But then there's this other part, this feeling that I've known you forever, that I'm supposed to trust you. And I'm not crazy, Adrian. I've lived my whole life being careful. Why would I even consider saying yes to something this insane? Adrian stood slowly, setting the untouched coffee aside. The distance between them felt suddenly fragile, like thin ice. He wanted to tell her everything, who he was, what he had done, why her dreams felt broken. But the truth was a heavy blade, and once drawn, it could never be sheathed again. Because, he said quietly, for reasons I cannot explain without sounding even more insane, I have spent years carrying the memory of one night I should have forgotten. A night when a human girl looked at a monster and saw a man instead. A night when someone who had every reason to run chose instead to be kind. Her breath caught. He took one step closer, not enough to threaten, just enough that she could see the faint, unnatural glow in his eyes. He let a fraction of the centuries rest in his voice, gentle and unhidden. I cannot tell you every truth tonight, he whispered. Not yet, but I can promise you this. If you come with me, I will protect you with everything that I am. You will not be a decoration on my arm. You will be the only person in that hall who knows I am more than the crown I wear. And if at any moment you wish to leave, I will bring you home before anyone can even think of stopping you. Her heartbeat quickened, thudding loud in his ears. Fear, wonder, a strange, rising trust. He felt every change as if it were his own. What kind of place is this wedding, Adrian? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. What kind of world are you really from? The fourth bell rang in the distance, deep and solemn. Adrian held her gaze, every instinct screaming to shield her from the answer, and every part of his soul knowing he couldn't lie. A dangerous one, he said at last. But tonight, it could also be the place where you finally find the missing piece you've been searching for. Her fingers curled around the edge of the counter until her knuckles went white. She looked at the locked door, at the dark street beyond, then back at him. The weight of her decision hung in the air like a held breath. You're asking me to walk into something I don't understand, she said. I am, he replied, voice trembling with honesty. And I am asking you to trust a man you should probably refuse. Elena's eyes glistened, not with fear, but with the raw, terrifying courage of someone stepping beyond the limits of their own life. When she spoke again, her voice shook, but it did not break. Then tell me one thing, she whispered. Not everything, just one true thing that no one else in that world of yours knows but you. Adrian felt the question cut clean through his defenses. One true thing. He had given orders, commands, laws, but rarely true pieces of himself. Slowly, he removed one glove, exposing a pale, flawless hand, marked by no scars despite an eternity of battles. He placed it flat on the wooden counter between them, close enough that she could touch it if she dared. One true thing, he said, the words nearly a confession. I have ruled for centuries. I have seen wonders and horrors, loyalty and betrayal. But in all that time, Elena, I have never been more afraid than I am right now of what you will choose. Her gaze dropped to his bare hand, then rose back to his eyes. She reached out, stopped just short of touching him, and in that tiny space between their fingers, something electric and ancient seemed to breathe. Outside, in a castle that did not yet know it would soon be holding its breath too, the wedding bells began to toll faster, calling their king back. And inside the quiet café, with the night pressing close to the windows, Elena drew in a slow, shaking breath. And finally made her choice. Some people think life changes with fireworks and big speeches. But the truth is, sometimes everything turns on a single, quiet word, spoken by someone who doesn't yet understand the size of what they're saying yes to. Elena's fingers hovered in the space between them, the air electric and fragile. Her heartbeat pounded in Adrian's ears, a wild, human drum that made him feel more alive than any battlefield ever had. She took one breath, then another, her eyes never leaving his. Yes, she whispered. The word was soft, but to Adrian it struck like lightning through stone. His carefully controlled world cracked in that instant. Every argument he had not spoken, every reason to protect her by walking away, fell silent before a truth that felt impossibly simple. She had chosen him. Her hand closed the last inch of distance, fingertips brushing his. He expected her to flinch at how cold his skin was, but she didn't. Instead, she turned her hand so that their palms met fully, her warmth soaking slowly into his chill. A small shiver ran through her, but she held on. Okay, she said, voice trembling but steady. I'll go with you to this wedding as your date. The word felt strange in her mouth. On two conditions. Adrian swallowed, startled by the fierce steadiness in her gaze. Name them. First, she said, no disappearing acts. If we walk into this together, we walk out together. You don't leave me alone in whatever dramatic castle drama you've got going on." He almost smiled, agreed. "Second," she continued, her voice softening, "at some point tonight, you tell me the truth, the real truth, about what happened to me, about why I feel like I've known you for years." His chest ached. "That truth is not gentle." "I don't need gentle," she replied quietly. "I just need real." He bowed his head once, accepting the weight of that promise. "Then you will have it." She exhaled as if she had just jumped from a cliff and discovered, mid-fall, that the air might hold her. "All right, your high-stress mysteriousness," she murmured. "Let's go before I change my mind." Adrian almost laughed at the nickname. In a life full of titles like Your Majesty and Lord of Night, hearing something so human, so teasing, felt like a small miracle. He slid his glove back on, then stepped around the counter, leaving enough space for her to retreat if she wanted to. She didn't. How exactly are we getting there?" she asked. "Please don't say Uber to the castle of eternal doom." He hesitated. "The way is not ordinary." He looked into her eyes, measuring her courage one last time. "I can take you safely, but you must trust me completely." She studied him for a heartbeat, then nodded. "I already jumped, might as well see where I land." He extended his arm, an old, courtly gesture. For a second, she seemed amused by the formality, then she slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow. The contact was light, but to him it felt like an anchor. "Close your eyes," he said softly, "and don't let go." She obeyed. He stepped back, drawing her gently with him. Shadows gathered at their feet, curling up like a living mist. The café around them dimmed, the sound of the city muffled as if sinking underwater. Elena's fingers tightened on his arm, a small, instinctive clutch. "I've got you," Adrian murmured. The world folded. It wasn't a violent movement, more like a long, slow exhale of reality. The light stretched and blurred. For a heartbeat, Elena felt weightless, as if hanging between one breath and the next. Then, just as quickly, solidity returned. "Okay," she said, eyes still shut. "If I open my eyes and we're in some horror movie dungeon, I'm walking right back out of this shadow portal thing. Deal?" "Open them," he replied quietly. She did. They stood at the top of a long, sweeping staircase of black marble, polished to a mirror shine. Below them, a vast hall stretched out, lit by 100 golden chandeliers. Candlelight glittered off crystal, off silver, off dark velvet and silks. Guests in elegant attire moved like slow constellations, their pale faces turned toward the music drifting from a string quartet near the far wall. At the end of the hall, under an archway of blood-red roses and white lilies, stood an altar made of obsidian. Empty now, but waiting. Elena's breath caught. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, wow." Adrian watched her, not the hall. The awe on her face, the way her fingers loosened just a little as wonder momentarily outweighed fear. That was what he wanted burned into his memory. "This is," she searched for words. "It's beautiful and slightly terrifying. Where exactly are we?" Before he could answer, a voice cut through the air. "The king has arrived." The music softened. Heads turned. Conversations stilled. It was as if someone had pressed pause on the entire room. Hundreds of eyes, cold, curious, calculating, fixed on the top of the staircase where Adrian stood with a human woman on his arm. Elena felt the weight of those stares like a sudden winter wind. She instinctively moved a fraction closer to Adrian's side. He straightened a hair taller, his presence shifting from quiet stranger to something vast and commanding. The dim, guarded glow in his eyes brightened just enough for the hall to feel it. Whispers rose, soft and sharp. "He actually brought someone. Is she one of ours?" "No," she breathes. Look at the color in her cheeks. "A human. Has the king lost his mind?" Adrian's jaw tightened, but his voice, when it came, was calm. "Do not fear them," he murmured just for Elena. "They are louder than they are brave." Elena swallowed. "You weren't kidding about the dramatic part." He almost smiled. "Welcome," he said, "to my world." Together they descended. Every step rang against marble, the sound carrying across the hall. Adrian felt his court reading him, measuring, judging, testing. He could sense their hunger for weakness, for reaction. Instead, he offered them something they did not expect: gentleness. Halfway down the stairs, Alina's heel caught in the slightest groove. She stumbled, just enough to send a flash of panic through her. Gasps fluttered around the hall, too fast, too eager. Adrian's hand moved instantly, steadying her with a touch so controlled and careful that she barely felt the force behind it. "I've got you," he said again, soft enough that only she could hear. She looked up at him, breathless, embarrassed, and saw no mockery there, only quiet concern. Something in her shoulders eased. She nodded once, regaining her balance. They continued. By the time they reached the floor, the whispers had turned to a thick, buzzing curiosity. A man stepped forward from the crowd, tall, handsome, with gentler features than Adrian and eyes the color of slow-burning embers. He wore ceremonial crimson, a small silver crown resting lightly in his dark hair. His face broke into a wide smile when he saw Adrian. "Brother," he said warmly, opening his arms, "you're late." Adrian's own expression softened in a way Alina had not yet seen. "Lucian." They clasped forearms briefly, a gesture half formal, half affectionate. Lucian's gaze slid to Alina, curiosity brightening. "And this must be the reason." He bowed slightly to her. "Welcome, I am Lucian. I hope my brother has not frightened you too much on the way here. He has a talent for speaking in half-truths and shadows." "Lucian," Adrian warned lightly. Alina surprised herself by smiling. "I'm Alina," she said, "and don't worry, I'm weirdly good at half-truths tonight." Lucian's smile widened as if he liked her immediately. But behind his charm, Adrian saw the flicker of calculation, of a prince raised in the same ruthless court, wondering why his brother had brought a human into the heart of their world. Before Adrian could reply, an older vampire with sharp silver eyes stepped closer, Marcel, his advisor. He bowed, but his voice held a strain. "Your Majesty, a word, if I may, in private." Adrian's fingers tightened slightly on Alina's arm, then loosened. He looked to her, silently asking permission to step away. She nodded once. "I'll be fine," she murmured. "There's a lot to look at." Lucian stepped smoothly into the space Adrian left, offering Alina the safety of his presence as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "I'll keep her company, brother," he said easily. "Go calm the council before they faint." Adrian met Alina's eyes. "If anyone troubles you," he said, his voice quiet but edged, "tell them the king will remember." Her answer was just as soft. "Go do your king stuff. I'll try not to break any immortal laws." He allowed himself one small nod, then followed Marcel to a shadowed alcove near the far wall. The moment they were out of easy earshot, Marcel turned, his calm facade cracking. "A human," he hissed. "Your Majesty, have you lost all sense of self-preservation? Bringing her here is." "Dangerous," Adrian finished, more gently than Marcel expected. "Yes, I am aware." "You know the old factions still watch for any sign of weakness," Marcel pressed. "They will not understand this as some brave act of compassion. They will see a liability, a vulnerability, to parade her here in front of everyone." "She is not a decoration," Adrian said, voice low but absolute. "She is under my protection, that should be enough." Marcel stared at him, anger and worry wrestling across his features. "Then tell me this. Is she just a symbol for the night or something more? Because the answer will decide how many enemies you make before dawn." Adrian's gaze drifted back to Alina, standing with Lucian near the edge of the crowd. She was watching the dancers with open wonder, ignoring the stares piercing her from all sides. One little hand gesture Lucian made her laugh, a small, beautiful sound that felt wrong in this hall of sharpened smiles and controlled charm. "Something more," Adrian said quietly. "Something I should have let go of a long time ago and didn't." Marcel exhaled slowly, the fight draining from his shoulders. "Then we must keep her alive," he said simply, "no matter what it costs." Before Adrian could respond, the great doors boomed shut. A hush fell. The ceremony was about to begin. Lucian's bride-to-be, Seraphine, entered the hall in a gown that shimmered like starlight on dark water. She was poised, graceful, her beauty cold and perfect. As she walked, the crowd bent with reverence. The vows began, ancient words binding two immortal houses. Adrian stood near the front with Alina at his side, the court's eyes occasionally flickering to them even as sacred phrases rang through the air. Alina listened, wide-eyed, to promises of eternal loyalty, shared power, and unending watchfulness. "It sounds," she whispered, leaning slightly toward Adrian, "more like a treaty than a love story." "For us," he murmured back, "love and treaties have never been far apart." He felt her glance at him, felt her wonder what that meant. When the vows reached the point of witnesses, the officiant turned toward Adrian. "Let the king step forward," the elder intoned, "and stand with his brother that the crown may bless this union." Adrian released Alina's arm slowly. "I will only be a moment," he said softly. Her hand brushed his wrist, intentionally this time a quiet anchor. "I'll be right here," she replied. He stepped forward, performed the ritual, the hand on his brother's shoulder, the ancient blessing spoken in a language older than most of the stars. As he did, something strange stirred. He felt Alina's presence behind him like a warm light, even though he wasn't facing her. For once, standing before his court did not feel like standing alone. When the ceremony ended and the hall erupted into applause, the music swelled and the celebration began. Guests moved into patterns, dancing, mingling, scheming. That was when the first open challenge came. A woman glided toward them, tall and elegant, with onyx hair and eyes like polished ice. Lady Vespera, head of one of the oldest and most rigid houses. She smiled, but there was nothing kind in it. "Your Majesty," she purred, bowing faintly, her gaze slid to Alina. "And what have we here?" Adrian's posture sharpened. "Lady Vespera, this is Alina. She is my guest." "A human guest," Vespera observed, her tone silk hiding thorns. "How modern of you." She took a half-step closer to Alina, studying her like a curious animal. "Do you know where you are, child?" Alina swallowed but forced herself to meet Vespera's gaze. "At a wedding," she said, "hopefully one with cake." A few nearby guests hid their surprise at the remark. Vespera's smile thinned. "Amusing," she said. "Does she amuse you, my king? Is that why you brought her here, a little novelty to delight the court?" "No," Adrian said, the single word suddenly very dangerous. "I brought her because I chose to. That is all the reason you need." Vespera's eyes flashed. She turned her full attention to Alina. "Do you understand what stands beside you, human? Do you know what he has done to keep that crown? What he has done to people like you?" Adrian's teeth clenched. Enough. Alina's heart pounded, but she stayed where she was, refusing to shrink back. She looked at Adrian, then at Vespera, then said quietly, "I don't know everything he's done, but I know how he's treated me since I met him. And I know how you're treating me now, if I have to choose which one to trust tonight." She let the unfinished sentence hang between them. The surrounding vampires caught it. A few eyes widened. Some exchanged glances. No one spoke. For a flicker of a second, something like respect flashed in Vespera's gaze, quickly smothered by disdain. "Careful," she said. "Courage can look very much like foolishness, right up until it costs you your life." Adrian stepped slightly in front of Alina now, his patience gone. "Lady Vespera," he said, voice low and cold. "Remember that you stand in my brother's hall under my protection. You will not threaten my guest, not with words and not with anything else." The air around them chilled. Power long held in check, stirred in Adrian's voice, not loud, not showy, but absolute. Vespera inclined her head just enough to keep the moment from breaking into open war. "As you wish, your Majesty," she said softly, "for tonight." She drifted away, her shadow trailing long behind her. Alina exhaled shakily. "She's intense." "She is dangerous," Adrian corrected, "and she will not forget what just happened." "Neither will I," Alina said, still catching her breath. "But for a different reason." She looked up at him, eyes searching. "Adrian, what did she mean, people like me? What have you done?" The question hung heavy. The music went on. Laughter rose around them. But inside that small circle of candlelight, time felt suspended. He could have deflected, postponed, lied. Instead, he heard her second condition in his mind. "At some point tonight, you tell me the truth." He led her to a quieter balcony that looked out over the dark forests beyond the castle. The night air was cool, the stars sharp. From here, the hall's noise was a distant hum. They stood alone, just the two of them, the stone rail pressing cold against Alina's hands. "You asked for one true thing," Adrian began. "Now I owe you the rest." Alina turned to him, wrapping her arms around herself. "You don't have to tell me everything at once," she said softly. "But I need to understand what I walked into with you." He met her gaze, unshielded. In his eyes she saw storms, centuries, and something achingly human trying to survive under all that weight. "I am the Vampire King," he said simply. "Not as a joke or a story, it is what I am. My people are not legends, we are history the world chose to forget, and I have done many things to keep them safe." She held very still as if any movement might break her. "And me," she whispered, "what happened to me?" He looked out at the dark trees. "Years ago you were lost in the forest one night. My hunters were on the move. You crossed a line you could not see. A beast, twisted by old magic, found you first. You should have died." His jaw tightened. "I intervened." Flashes came to Alina in jagged, half-formed pieces. Trees, breathless running, eyes in the dark, rain, a hand. "You were there," she breathed. "Yes," he said. "You were terrified, but when you saw what I was, you were not afraid for yourself anymore. You were afraid for me. You stood between me and the creature even when you could barely stand. No human had ever done that for me, no immortal either." Her voice trembled, and then, "I killed the beast," he said quietly, "and I carried you to safety. You asked me to promise something, that I would not pretend to love someone just to satisfy my court, that I would not let them use my loneliness against me." His eyes softened with a pain that had never fully healed. "I promised. Then, to protect you from my world, I erased your memories of that night. I let you go. I told myself it was kindness." Alina's hands pressed to her temples as if containing a sudden rush of sound. Images flickered faster now, rain on her face, a stranger's eyes glowing red, the fierce warmth in his voice when he said, "I've got you." "That's the missing piece," she whispered. "All these years, that empty space in my mind was you." "Yes," Adrian said, voice breaking slightly. "And I came back for you tonight, not because it is safe, not because it is wise, but because when they told me I could no longer appear alone, your voice was the only one I heard. I realized I would rather face this hall with you at my side in honesty and risk than with anyone else in comfort and lies." Tears shone in her eyes, not from fear, but from the strange, sharp ache of puzzle pieces finally falling into place. "So you brought me here," she said, "to keep a promise I don't even remember making." "I brought you here," he corrected gently, "because even after erasing your memories, I could not erase you from myself. That is my greatest failure as a king, and the only thing that has ever made me feel truly worthy of the crown I wear." She laughed softly through the threat of tears. "You're not supposed to say things like that to someone you just dragged into a supernatural political minefield." "I am not supposed to feel them," he answered, "but I do." Silence settled, heavy and tender. "So Vespera was right," Alina said at last, voice distant. "People like me, humans, you've hurt them, killed them." He did not look away. "Yes, when they threatened my people, when they hunted us, when war left me with choices that all ended in blood. I will not lie and say my hands are clean, Alina, they are not. But I can say this, the night I met you, something changed. You made it harder to see mortals as a single, faceless danger. You made me softer in ways my enemies would love to exploit." Tears slipped free now, finally. "And you still risked bringing me here knowing that?" "Yes," he said, "because I am tired of ruling with only fear. Because I wanted, for once, to choose something kind, even if it frightens me more than any war." She turned fully toward him. "You should have let me keep the memory," she whispered. "Maybe my life would have been less lonely." His voice was rough. "Perhaps, or perhaps you would have been hunted for what you knew. I thought I was saving you." Alina took a long, shaky breath. "Then maybe we both spent years trying to protect each other by staying apart." He stared at her, the truth of that sinking deep. Inside, the music changed. A new melody swelled, slow, aching, full of ancient longing. Guests began to drift toward the dance floor. The celebration pulsed on, unaware of the quiet revolution happening on the balcony. Adrian, she said softly, what happens after tonight, when this wedding is over, when your court remembers I'm human, when they realize how much you care? Then they will know my weakness, he answered honestly, and I will have to be stronger than I have ever been. Her brows furrowed. That sounds like I'm putting you in danger too. You are, he said, and I am grateful for it. She blinked. You're grateful to be in danger. I am grateful, he said with a faint smile, to finally have something worth risking myself for. She looked down at the hall, then back at him at the seemingly endless night behind his eyes. I don't know if I can live in this world of yours, she admitted. I have a café, a tiny life. It's not a castle, but it's mine. I don't know if I can belong in both places. You do not have to decide that tonight, he said. Tonight, I ask only one thing more of you. What? She whispered. He extended his hand, palm open. Dance with me, he said. Just one dance, not as king and human, not as monster and saved girl, just as two people who met in the rain once and somehow found each other again. She stared at his hand, at the hall, at him. Then slowly, she placed her hand in his. They stepped back into the lights. The court parted for them, curiosity burning brighter than any candle. Adrian led her onto the dance floor with a care that melted into something fluid and natural. He moved with centuries of practiced grace. She moved with the hesitant, untrained steps of someone learning a new language in real time. She stumbled once, he caught her. The second time, she laughed at herself, and the sound loosened his shoulders. By the third step, they found a rhythm that was theirs alone, a quiet compromise between practiced elegance and honest, stumbling courage. As they turned, guests watched, some with suspicion, some with hunger, some reluctantly with a kind of quiet awe they would never admit to. Lucian, standing with his new bride, met Adrian's gaze across the room. He raised his goblet slightly in a private toast, eyes warm and a little sad, as if he understood more than his brother had said. Elena looked up at Adrian as they moved. You know, she murmured, for a king with centuries of wisdom, you're really not great at avoiding emotional chaos. He smiled genuinely this time. I am learning, he said, from a very reckless teacher. She tilted her head. Do you regret it, bringing me here? His answer came instantly. No, only that I waited this long. The music built to a soft, shimmering peak, and for a moment, just a moment, the hall faded around them. It was like standing in the rain again, the rest of the world blurred into background sound. I don't know what happens after tonight, Elena said quietly, as if confessing a secret to the music rather than to him. I don't know if I'm brave enough to stand in your world, or if you really can fit into mine. But I know this, I don't feel that empty space inside me anymore. The missing piece, it's not missing now. He drew in a breath he didn't need. Then perhaps, he said, whatever we decide after tonight, this will have already been worth it. The last notes of the song lingered in the air like held breath. Their dance slowed to a stop. For a second, neither of them let go. Around them, the court erupted into polite applause. To them, it was just a dance, a spectacle, a signal that their king had finally chosen someone, whether wisely or foolishly remained to be seen. But to Adrian and Elena, it was something else entirely. It was a promise without words. He led her from the floor back toward the balcony where the stars waited. When the night ends, he said, voice soft but certain, I will take you home to your city, to your café. You will wake tomorrow with every memory intact. This time I will not take them from you. What you do with those memories will be your choice. Stay in your world, walk in mine, walk between them. I will not decide for you again. Her eyes shone. You'll really let me choose? I will insist on it, he answered. And if I choose something that makes everything harder for you? She asked. Then, he said, with a quiet courage he hadn't shown anyone in centuries, I will learn to live with my heart being more important than my crown. She smiled, a little broken, a little radiant. For what it's worth, she said, you don't scare me either, not anymore. Good, he murmured, because you terrify me. She laughed, the sound soft and disbelieving and full of possibility. The night wrapped around them, not as a threat, but as a cloak. Far below, the human city glittered like a reflection of the stars. Somewhere in that maze of light waited her small café, her stacked cups, her quiet life. Somewhere above and around her stretched Adrian's world of shadows and vows and impossible expectations. Between them, on that balcony of stone and starlight, stood two people who had every reason to walk away and every reason not to. Alina looked at him, at the hall, at the sky. She didn't make any grand decisions, not yet, but she did something just as important. She reached for his hand, not because she had to, not because he asked, but because she wanted to. He took it, and in that simple, human gesture, the vampire king finally understood something his centuries had never taught him. Sometimes the bravest thing a monster can do is let himself be seen as a man. The wedding went on, alliances shifted, enemies took quiet note of the human at the king's side. But the night did not end in disaster. No one died. No war began. Instead, something far more dangerous took root in the heart of the immortal court. The sight of their feared king choosing kindness openly and surviving it. Hours later, as the moon slid lower in the sky, Adrian stood once more in the shadows of the city, Alina beside him. The cafe lights were dark, the street quiet. "This is where we started tonight," she said. "No," he replied. "We started long before tonight, but this is where we begin, honestly." She looked at him, at the castle's faint outline in the distance, at her own reflection in the cafe window. "I don't know yet what I'll choose," she admitted, "but I know I want time to find out." "You have all the time you wish," he said simply. "Do you?" she asked, a soft challenge. "You're a king, you have duties." He smiled, faint and real. "Tonight, my greatest duty was to one promise I made in the rain. I intend to keep honoring it." She took a step closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body even through the cold air. "Then, until I figure this out," she said, "you may consider this cafe neutral ground, not your world, not mine, just ours. If you want to see me, you do it here. As Adrian, not just as the vampire king." His throat tightened. "I would like that," he said. "Good," she replied, "because whether you're a vampire king or not, you still owe me one properly enjoyed cup of coffee." He glanced at the closed door. "Next time." "Next time," she said. For a moment they simply stood there, the distance between their worlds held together by a single, fragile, beautiful thread. He didn't kiss her. She didn't ask him to. Some stories don't end with a kiss, they end with something braver. A choice to keep walking forward together, even when the path is unclear. Adrian stepped back into the shadows, the darkness curling around him like an old friend. "Until next time, Alina." She watched his eyes, still faintly glowing in the dark. "Don't be late for your next royal drama," she said softly. "And try not to erase any more of my memories, okay?" "Never again," he promised. With a whisper of displaced air and a ripple in the shadows, he was gone. Alina stood alone on the quiet street, heart racing, head spinning, soul humming with new, impossible truths. She looked up at the sky, at the faint glimmer of a castle no one else on her block could see. "Okay," she murmured to herself. "A vampire king, a missing memory, a choice between worlds." She smiled, small but sure. "Some wedding." Then she turned, key in hand, and stepped into her cafe, the little place that had somehow become the doorway between an ordinary life and a legend still being written. And somewhere far above, in a hall of roses and candlelight, the vampire king looked out over his restless court with a quiet, steady courage. Knowing that for the first time in a very long time, he was not waiting for a queen chosen by politics or fear. He was waiting for a human girl in a red dress, in a small cafe called Luna Nocturna, to decide, not if he was a monster or a king, but if, after everything, he was someone worth walking into the dark with.